What is up, YouTube? I'm Devon, DaVinci, leader of the Renaissance crew, and you're watching DaVinci Reacts. Today we're going to be checking out a video that I've, from a content creator I've seen a number of times in the past. This is Atun-Shei. By the way, thank y'all for helping me pronounce that. It took a few videos, but I managed to get it. This video is called, Is Civil War History Being Rewritten? Now, the question is, it's not necessarily that it's being rewritten, it's that it's been attempted to be written a number of times in the past with the Lost Cause myth and the, what were they called? The Wives of Confederacy or the Wives of Liberty, whatever their names were. In an attempt to try to paint the Confederacy as something more than what it actually was, which was just a side that was fighting for slavery. And they try to change it to be, oh no, they're rebels and they're fighting against a tyrannical government. No, they're fighting for slavery. That's one thing I don't really play when it comes to debates. Like, I can debate a lot of things, but if you come on this channel just looking to like push a lost cause myth or trying to say like, oh no, the South didn't do anything wrong, or the North was, I've had these people in the comment section before. The North were the ones that actually started everything and da 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 da. Yeah, doing stuff like that, all I'm gonna tell you is go somewhere else with that shit. And if you keep doing it, you will get banned. It's that simple. I'm not gonna waste any time with it. I'm not gonna waste any effort with it. So for those of you that think, well, oh, I'm gonna troll them and say that, you're just gonna get banned. That's it. Instant ban. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this and see what it has to offer. I know Atun-Shei is very, very, very familiar when it comes to the whole Civil War thing, because he essentially lives it. Like, I'm trying to see why this thing is like, there we go. Okay, I was able to fix it. It was like zoomed in or something. It was kind of weird, but he's very familiar with the Civil War thing, him being a reenactor and a Civil War historian. I think he's a historian. I don't want to put too much on him if he isn't, but he knows what he's talking about. That's for damn sure. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this. I will have Atun-Shei's channel, a link to it at the end of the video. You'll see an icon pop up, and I'll have the original video in the description box down below. That way you can check that out if you don't want to hear me pausing it, or if you want to watch it without me giving commentary on top of it, or if you want to just go and chill at Atun-Shei's channel. If you got a problem with something that he says, he'd be a lot more versed in debating than I would. As someone who was both a lost causer and someone that transitioned and started to understand what the Civil War actually was about, he would know more about both sides of the argument. So that'd be the person that you really want to debate against. But with that being said, let's jump into this.
Slavery. The war was about slavery. God damn it. Wait a minute. How is this even possible? Is it the school system? Is it your home life?
Oh, come on, I was into that. That disgusting film is nothing more than Yankee propaganda. History is written by the victors, and now through political correctness, today's media are rewritten as those of us with common sense know as true history. Well, that's a bunch of baloney, and you're living proof of that. Millions of people around the world believe that the South seceded in the Civil War because of states' rights and taxation. And through most of the 20th century, many Americans even regarded antebellum slavery as a relatively benevolent and humane institution. And I don't know if you remember, but you guys lost, like, big time. You got your asses handed to you.
Simmer down.
Your asses were surgically removed and physically placed within the grasp of violence.
Yeah, the the Nazi Party lasted longer than the goddamn Confederacy. I love when people mention this. Obama's presidency was almost twice as long as the Confederacy.
My own hands.
All right, that's enough of your cheek. This is serious.
As you can see, I have no love for the
In
Confederacy.
elementary school, middle school, high school, and college, we all learned that the Civil War was about states' rights and all the reasons behind the war. But then, not too long ago, the narrative changed. And suddenly the Civil War was 100% about slavery and only slavery.
That means whoever was
Literally
teaching you
nothing
early
else.
on
literally
was pushing lost cause
be rewritten
bullshit.
in front of my eyes. But I suppose you think I'm just being ridiculous.
No, I think you're right. The Civil War history is absolutely being rewritten.
Check me to the Lincolnites.
But history is always being rewritten. That's how it works. Historical hypotheses are made to be challenged and questioned as others bring attention to different evidence or come at the issue from illuminating new perspectives. That's right. There are always two sides of history, and both need to be heard even if you disagree with one point of view. Well, I think there's a hell of a lot more sides of history than just two. There are as many different perspectives on the Civil War as there were people who lived through it. But not all perspectives are valid history. Some narratives can be misleading, or even outright false, and for a historian to parrot them uncritically out of some misguided sense of inclusion is just really fucking irresponsible. What you consider to be the southern side of the story of the Civil War is literally just lost cause mythology. The lost cause isn't a valid point of view on anything. It's just a collection of factually incorrect claims. It's not a question of perspective or interpretation. This stuff is just demonstrably wrong. Says you. And what exactly do you and your cronies consider the lost cause myth? Because from what I've seen in your channel, anything that doesn't depict Confederate soldiers as bloodthirsty villains is lost cause propaganda. What you are calling the lost cause myth is so unbelievably...
Notice the person's username is Stonewall Jackson with a picture of Stonewall Jackson. It's safe to say this person isn't coming into this debate with a middle of the ground, unbiased opinion. I think they might have some motives behind their arguments here.
Broad, it could encompass essentially any unbiased review of the Civil War. Oh, I'm referring to something very specific when I talk about the lost cause myth. Essentially, it's a pro-Confederate belief system that emerged from the post-war histories of the White South. Its seeds were planted during the war itself, as Confederates tried to solicit international sympathy by distancing themselves from the cause of slavery for which they seceded, but really came to the fore in the 1880s and 90s, when ex-Confederates began a systematic campaign to sanitize their reasons for secession and paint their actions during the war in the best possible light. Seems far-fetched to me. What, so former Confederates just rewrote history within living memory and everybody just went along with it?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. That's crazy. Is it? I mean, look.
I mean, you can look at the current situation. It's not too hard to convince people to go against reality if the reality that they want to push is in line with their own preconceived notions. Like, people will absolutely bend over backwards to believe bullshit if it goes in line with what they want to believe. It's like a lot of people, especially in this internet age, they have this thing where it's like they try to find truth, but their idea of finding truth isn't to like look at an argument and look at both sides and find the one that logically makes sense. And when I say logically, I'm not talking about like makes sense to you. I'm talking about through the actual mechanisms to determine a logical argument, like making sure it doesn't fall into any logical fallacies and things like that. People don't do that. Instead, their ideas of trying to find truth is they will go online. Well, first they'll make up a conclusion in their head, something that makes sense to them, and then they'll go online and look up sources that verify what they already believe. And if they find something, even if it's something as simple as a meme on Facebook, that's all they need. And then that essentially just reinforces what they already believed, even if what they believe isn't based on any actual logical foundation. They just, it's cemented in their head now because now they feel vindicated in believing what they, at the time, assumed was the truth, but they didn't have the actual proof. This was their actual proof.
Pretty much, yeah. That's crazy. Is it? I mean, look at what's been happening in recent American history. No matter what side of the political divide you're on, I think you would confidently say that the people on the other side have deceived themselves into believing a narrative that's completely divorced from reality. Amen, brother. At least with the lost cause, there's a grain of truth. Like, if you squint at Civil War history and cock your head, you can kind of see it. But today, I mean, shit. Remember the gay frog guy? Lots of people were totally on board with the gay frog guy. People crave meaning in their lives. People desperately crave meaning, and myths can give it to us. Well, I say there was no lost cause. State rights. Well, let's look at some of the evidence. As we've talked about before, defense of home and hearth was not the only reason Confederate soldiers went to war. Defense of slavery and white supremacy were also powerful motivating factors, and a significant number of them said as much in their diaries and letters. Oh, gracious, this again. And I suppose this is where you bust out her racist quote. I literally have a whole duffel bag full of them. Okay. Pick a quote. Any quote. The Vandals of the North are determined to destroy slavery. We must all fight, and I choose to fight for Southern rights and Southern liberty. Lunsford Yandell Jr., Staff Surgeon, 4th Tennessee Infantry, April 1861.
Yes, the only right they were fighting for was the right to be able to keep
You'll
slaves.
A stand.
Now, was there some situations where, not situations, now was there some other issues that they also probably wanted to throw in there as like some little small caveats like, oh, well, we also don't like this and we don't like that. Sure, but the main biggest thing that was the purpose for them starting the war to begin with, and yes, I said starting the war because they were the ones that fired the first shots, was slavery, period.
You'll see. A stand must be made for African slavery, or it is forever lost. William Grimble, 1st South Carolina Artillery, November 1860. Another?
Someone can make an argument that, oh, these are just small-time
Would be
infantry.
completely worthless. We can only live and exist by that species of labor.
So you got to find the big wig quotes.
I am willing to fight to the last. William Nugent, 28th Mississippi Infantry, September 1863. Let me top you off there. Lincoln declares the blacks entitled to all the rights and privileges as American citizens. So imagine your sweet little girls in the schoolroom with a black, woolly-headed Negro and have to treat them as their equal. William Garner, 10th Arkansas Cavalry, January 1864. Refills are free. I will show the Yankees that a white man is better than a... That's a bad word.
That's a bad word.
Bradshaw, 38th North Carolina Infantry, April 1862. And that guy was just a private, a poor farmer. Well, let's do one more, just because we're having so much fun.
That's a big one.
It is liberty or death with me. I love home and all that surrounds it as much as anybody. But if I have to be the equal to a nope. I had rather never come home. Better me fall in the struggle for it. Will McKee, 18th Georgia Infantry, September 1861. Jesus.
And again, the messed up part about all this is you would think that based on how these people are essentially willing to die over this idea of racial superiority, you would think that this was something that has been affecting humanity from the beginning. And by that, I mean like black versus white, African versus European Americans, or whatever else. But like, yeah, you would think it would be something that goes all the way back to like the beginning of time where there was just this like divide. And the thing is, there wasn't. Like before colonialization, there wasn't a racial like issue between like black people and white people. Now there were like some issues with race still, like more so ethnicities. Race wasn't really a thing. It was ethnicities that there was issues with. But as far as like black versus white, there wasn't that issue. That only really happened around what they say, like around like the 15 or 1600s. So it was like about as long as the end of slavery was to us today was about how long non-racism was to the people of the Confederacy. So it's like y'all hadn't even been under that rule for that long for you to be so deeply entrenched in it.
There's a lot more where that came from in the duffel bag, but I don't want to belabor the point. We've covered this before. So, During the Civil War, many Confederate soldiers expressed very strong pro-slavery sentiments, but decades after the war, they changed their tune. In Sam Watkins' famous Confederate memoir, Company H, written 20 years after the
I love to
events
see if
in
there was
question,
quotes from any
the
of them
author
specific
plainly
people
stated
that changed their
We
argument.
believe in the doctrine of state rights. They in the doctrine of centralization. We only fought for our state rights. They for union and power. The South fell battling under the banner of state rights, but yet grand and glorious, even in death.
Weird, right? Or we can listen to the 1947 audio interview of 101-year-old Confederate veteran Julius Howell, which has gone viral in a video posted by the eminent historian Black Confederate One, and is often touted as definitive proof that Confederate soldiers did not fight for slavery.
Don't get me started on the Black Confederate stuff. Oh my God. I see a black person with a Confederate flag trying to make an argument that like, oh, it's my history and it's about rebellion and this, that, and the other. Like, don't get me wrong. There are some people that probably were falsely given the impression that it was a rebellion flag or a symbol of rebellion. Like, I'm a fan of Leonard Skinner, for example. Leonard Skinner very famously had Confederate flags like all over their branding. With that being said, unless there's some evidence that comes out where Leonard Skinner's just out here just going on these like racial tirades and stuff, they, for the most part, like, they seem like they believe in the whole rebel thing, or like the fact that it represents like their state or something like that, or just being a Southerner, I guess. But it's like, yeah, it has this, there's the perceived history, then there's the actual history. So I'm not going to knock people that have a perceived history, like if you just weren't aware of it, especially around that time, because I'm pretty sure the Southern schools weren't teaching that Civil War was actually about just slavery. So I can like give them the benefit of the doubt. But in today's age, with the internet and all the information that we have at our fingertips and the different sources that you have that can teach you about what the Civil War was actually about, the fact that there's black people that are still out here trying to defend the damn Confederate flag is ridiculous. It's crazy. And I'll just call it what it is. These are some self-hating Uncle Tom, well, not Uncle Tom, self-hating Sambo dudes that, and women that just are lost in the sauce. That's essentially all it is.
Slavery.
The South did not fight for the preservation or extension of slavery. Now, friend, it was a great curse on this country that we had slavery. And I thank God that I did not bring up my boys and girls under a system of slavery under which I was brought under. What did you boys fight for then? For states' rights. For states' rights.
And it wasn't just
That's
the
not what
soldiers
the president
who were saying this
said.
stuff. The men of the upper echelon of the Confederate government, former plantation owners who in 1860 had shouted from the mountaintops that they were seceding to preserve slavery, seemed to suffer from a severe case of post-war amnesia. So said Jefferson Davis in his memoirs.
Slavery was in no wise the cause of the conflict.
And as former Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens argued in 1868,
The conflict on this question of slavery was not a contest between the advocates or opponents of that peculiar.
So this is what I wanted to hear, because Alexander Stephens has a direct quote that says that the nation that he created, the Confederacy, was built on the great truth of the white man's superiority or something like that. Like, bruh, it was about slavery.
so what changed? What happened? The lost cause happened. Look, after 1865,
Now, I know you can make the argument
material
about that
conditions-
quote, like, well, it doesn't technically say anything about slavery. It talks more about like racism. And it's like, yeah, there's many places that argued that slavery shouldn't exist, but still were very racist. There's a case of that. But yeah, all you gotta do is look at the fucking secession letters from the different states that seceded to know what their actual reason was, and it was fucking slavery.
The lost cause happened. Look, after 1865, material conditions in the rebellious states were dire. Southern wealth had been reduced by 60%, down from pre-war levels, caused as much by Confederate mismanagement as by Union invasion. Half of all their farm machinery was inoperable, the railroad system was in ruins, and what little industrial capability they had was utterly destroyed. These factors had a dramatic, negative impact on white Southerners' quality of life, and the humiliation of defeat was psychologically devastating. In their personal correspondences, many Confederates wrote frankly about their experiences of despondence and hopelessness after the surrender. Many fell into a spiral of anxiety, depression, and alcohol abuse. The imagery that pervades their writings were of death and darkness, gloom in the tomb. With the power of the slavocracy forever shattered, ex-Confederates of the plantation class would soon have to jostle for political power against a whole host of highly motivated new rivals: upcountry Unionists, white yeoman farmers, Afro-Creole elites, and Republican freedmen. And all these other Southerners had something that ex-Confederates distinctly lacked: a story, a unifying mythology that defined them as a group and a people. In 1865, what was the Confederate story? Rebels, failures, slavers, traitors. As an early leader of the United Confederate Veterans put it,
If we cannot justify the South in the act of secession, we will go down in history solely as a brave, impulsive, but rash people who attempted in an illegal manner to overthrow the Union of our country.
it was a fate worse than death, an eternally dishonorable reputation. Something had to be done to avoid it. Ex-Confederates needed to improve their self-image. Less than a year after Appomattox, one Georgia newspaper predicted that
The victory over Southern arms is to be followed by a victory over Southern opinions.
ex-Confederates were determined to control the narrative. And almost as soon as the guns went silent, they rushed to write and publish Southern-centric histories of the war between the states.
Seems they were right to do so, for time proved that newspaper man right. Marxist, Maoist, mainstream historians have made it their non-binary mission to shove a plant-based Civil War narrative down our collective throats. Descendants of the Confederacy take pride in their ancestors and should be allowed to honor them as New England and other regions honors their ancestors. But the Confederacy is being unfairly disparaged by today's cultural genocide that is also degrading the Founding Fathers and other once esteemed aspects of American heritage.
Well, you're allowed to honor your Confederate ancestors just like you're allowed to buy truck nuts. You're free to do these things, they just make you look like a fucking asshole. And cultural genocide. Jesus Christ.
Remember truck nuts?
Queen.
But is that term not apropos for the Reconstruction era South? We had failed to achieve political independence, but in undertaking to write our own histories, we began a fight for cultural independence that would become an enduring part of American life.
What? It's very uncanny how you go from just totally insane to completely reasonable at the drop of a hat. It's just profoundly weird. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The first major offensive of this cultural war of independence came in 1866, when Edward A. Pollard, the wartime editor of the Richmond Examiner, began publishing his war histories, most notably The Lost Cause, a new Southern history of the War of the Confederates, which is probably the origin of the term. Rabidly pro-slavery before the war, Pollard went on to become a Confederate true believer and a tireless evangelist of the Southern side of history. In his books, Pollard did not deny that slavery played a role in secession, but tempered his analysis with white supremacist apologia.
The occasion of that conflict was what the Yankees called, by one of their convenient labels in political nomenclature, slavery. But what was, in fact, nothing more than a system of Negro servitude in the South, one of the mildest and most beneficent systems of servitude in the world.
This claim was still
Wow.
pretty close to the wartime Confederate Party line.
It wasn't that
At
bad.
this early stage,
They're making
the
it seem like
exact
it was
tenets of the
worse than
myth
it
were
actually
still
was.
unformed. But very quickly, more and more Southern histories began to deny that slavery had had anything to do with secession, instead fixating on more defensible motives like states' rights, libertarian government, and anti-industrialism. The first issue
It reflects very heavily the whole idea of the Southern strategy from the late 1960s, 1970s. When you hear, well, the quote came much later than that, but the person that was giving the quote was one of the key figures behind the concept of the Southern strategy, and his name was Lee Atwater. And he has a very famous quote from, where was it? I forgot exactly where he was, but it was like he was recorded and he didn't know he was being recorded. And he essentially explained what the Southern strategy was. And it reflects this to a T, where it's like you have a very harsh reality version of what they're trying to do, but they'll try to do it in a way that you can't directly point back to, oh, you were doing it for this heinous reason. So it was like dog whistles. So in his argument, he was saying like, you know, you start off by using racial slurs and racism and things like that. I'm not quoting him exactly. I'm just giving you the idea of what he was saying. You can find a quote yourself. But he was essentially saying like you start off with the harsh stuff, but then after a while, ideas change and the way the country is is made up. You can't do that anymore because now it starts to hurt you politically if you come out just being a rabid racist. So what you got to do is you got to start saying and doing certain things that are very vague and you can't pinpoint directly to racism, like busing and states' rights and things like that. That way you can still say and do things that directly impact minorities, people of color, but you're not directly saying it. So you're still affecting them. You're just not saying it directly. So it can't be pointed back to you going, oh, you're a racist.
Rights, libertarian government, and anti-industrialism. The first issue of the Southern Historical Society papers, an influential Lost Cause periodical, indicated a subtle but definitive shift in Southern historiography.
The late Civil War, which raged in the United States, has been very generally attributed to the abolition of slavery as its cause. But a close study of the history of the times will bring us to the conclusion that it was the fear of a mischief far more extensive and deeper even than this, which drove cool and reflected minds of the South to believe it was better to make the death struggle at once than to submit tamely to what was inevitable. Had the South permitted her property, her constitutional rights, and her liberties to be surreptitiously taken from her without resistance and made no moan, would she not have lost her honor with them? If the alternative were between such a loss and armed resistance, is it surprising that she preferred the latter?
Lost Cause writers paid particular attention in those early days to rehabilitating the reputations of key Confederate leaders, especially Robert E. Lee. No one was more instrumental in this than Lee's old division commander, Jubal Early, who published the first book-length memoir of any Civil War general late in 1866. Drawing on experience from his years as a lawyer, Early began a campaign of ideas that was so scorched earth it would have made Sherman blush. His histories defended every last aspect of Lee's generalship, and when any historian dared to disparage the old hero, Early viciously attacked them in print. For decades after the Civil War, no one ever took up a pen to write about the conflict without living in mortal fear of Jubal Early. Old Jube simply wished to defend General Lee from the defamations and detractions of ignorant persons. Concerning the Battle of Gettysburg, for example, he set the record straight. Some said Marse Robert was responsible for our defeat. Imagine that. It's nonsense. General Longstreet, bless his heart, failed to carry out Lee's order to attack at dawn on July the 2nd. If he had attacked promptly, we would have carried the day and won the battle. I doubt it not. Well, there's only one problem with that, which is that no dawn order was ever given. As far as anybody knows, Early made that little factoid up at Lee's birthday celebration in Lexington, Virginia in 1872. And a lot of Confederate veterans who had been officers at Gettysburg were kind of baffled by it. But Early kept repeating it and writing about it. And William Nelson Pendleton, Lee's old chief of artillery, dutifully propagated the lie in his writing. It would become so prevalent that it was part of most histories of the Battle of Gettysburg until well into the 20th century.
Just the thing I hate about how well a lie could carry through, even if it's so blatantly wrong. And it's a lot you'll see in like modern politicians on certain sides of the political spectrum. Well, really from both, but I think more so from one than the other. But the idea that like, oh, it doesn't matter if you're lying, as long as you lie big enough and you repeat it, then eventually people will just like believe it. And you want to say like, no, that's bullshit, because people aren't that stupid to just believe something simply because you repeat it a lot. But the truth is, it does work. Like that's the messed up part. Someone can like know for a fact that something is a certain way, but then someone else will say that it's a different way and will scream it from the rooftops and degrade anybody that goes against it. And it's like eventually the people that know the truth will just be like, oh, maybe that's what really happened. And it's like, how do you, I don't know. It just irritates the hell out of me.
That it was part of most histories of the Battle of Gettysburg until well into the 20th century. But what possible reason would they have to fib? Well, because Longstreet had quarreled with Lee, and Longstreet had been right. After the war, he publicly criticized Lee's leadership, so he was high on Jubal's shit list. Not to mention, he famously became a Republican and worked closely with the Grant administration to help enfranchise freedmen during Reconstruction.
At the time, the Republicans were the side that were fighting for slavery,
I'm basically
not
just
fighting
saying
against
that
slavery.
he didn't completely hate black people. Yeah, that's more or less the historic context of that word. A scalawag is a white Southerner who doesn't completely hate black people, and a carpetbagger is a white Northerner who doesn't completely hate black people. Oh, yeah. Well, then why
I knew
did
about the
Longstreet try to
carpetbagger
defend
term, but I
himself,
didn't know about
if he was
the
so blameless and innocent. He
scallywag
did,
origins.
just badly. His public retorts to Early and Pendleton were ponderous and tone-deaf and full of sloppy misstatements of fact. It only made him more unpopular, and his inaccuracies gave lost cause evangelists an opening to shred his credibility. You call these historians evangelists like the lost cause was some sort of religion or something. Well, it kind of became one in a way, especially after Reconstruction. In the 1870s, the tenets of the lost cause consolidated themselves into a coherent mythology. Slavery wasn't a major cause of the war, states' rights, tariffs, whatever. Lincoln was a tyrant / northern aggression. The Confederate Army was completely badass, and Bob Lee was the perfect man. Sherman was worse than Genghis Khan, and the Union Army was full of rapers and pillagers. Basically, the stuff you and I have been talking about for years now. Black people and everybody up north still thought this stuff was pretty bonkers. Union veterans organizations were particularly outspoken in their skepticism and disgust, but it came to be widely believed in the white South. And just as people congregate in churches, temples, or mosques to worship their God, Southerners congregated at reunions, funerals, and monument dedications to reinforce their cultural myth through ceremony and ritual. Oh, come on. These were veterans' reunions, not the black sleep of Kali Ma. These events were just soldiers hanging out and reminiscing. What's the big deal? Oh, but it was so much more than that. These were profoundly meaningful events for these people, and the level of reverence on display was over the top even by Victorian standards. The ecclesiastical aspects were overt. Southern religious leaders had been among the most vocal secessionists, and later became some of the most passionate lost cause evangelists. Sermons delivered by these men were a mainstay of post-war ceremonies, blending evangelical Protestantism with the emerging theology of the Confederate Redeemer Nation. Reverend J. William Jones, a wartime chaplain, Baptist preacher, and key contributor to the Southern Historical Society papers, typically began his prayers with the words,
"O God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God of Israel, God of the centuries, God of our fathers, God of Jefferson Davis, Robert Edward Lee, and Stonewall Jackson, Lord of hosts, King of kings."
And this is why I'm
like
not
any other religion,
religious.
the lost cause had its pantheon. Lee and Davis, having suffered for their people, were identified with
The fact that the person that gave that prayer wasn't immediately turned into a pillar of salt after saying it is what makes me not religious.
cause had its pantheon. Lee and Davis, having suffered for their people, were identified with Christ. Stonewall Jackson, long-bearded and wild-eyed, syncretized with Moses. Longstreet, that errant disciple and betrayer, was Judas. The lost cause had its iconography. The battle flag was as sacred and ubiquitous as the crucifix, and as monuments started springing up all over the South in the 1880s and 90s, graven images of Confederate saints were imbued with special significance as altars and gathering places. Wartime artifacts took on the quality of medieval relics, and veterans organizations were encouraged to guard official Confederate documentation, as one United Daughter of the Confederacy put it, as zealously
Daughters
as
of the Confederacy,
children
that's
of
what they were
Israel
called.
did the Ark of the Covenant. Lost cause histories were literally referred to as catechisms. You can still find one on the Sons of Confederate Veterans website. So ex-Confederates were a little extra in their commemorations of the war. So what? Still seems pretty innocuous to me. Not so much. There was always a political dimension to lost cause ceremonies, and political advocacy was an important function of veterans groups, mainly in support of segregationist policies designed to continue white rule in the South. Politicians frequently spoke at Confederate reunions, and as the decades wore on, different political movements claiming the heritage of lost cause cultural memory made veterans events their soapbox. In the 19th century, it was anti-Reconstructionists and populists. In the 20th, Wilsonian Democrats and civil rights era reactionaries. This continues today in lost cause spaces online, where pro-Confederate blogs, Facebook groups, and subreddits fearmonger about cancel culture just as much as they celebrate Civil War history.
Yeah.
Those websites.
And real quick, that goes into the whole argument of like, just the bad faith actors, the people that talk about like, oh, well, did you know the Democrats were the what? Like, yes, everyone that has a basic understanding of American history knows that the Democrats are the ones that fought for slavery. We know that. But what you're not leaving out is the fact that, and I'm not here to defend like the party of Democrats because honestly, I don't care. I care more about the ideas and policies because chances are if I was around in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, I'd have been a Republican also. But the argument or the idea that like that keeps getting left out is the fact that Republicans at the time were very much the liberal progressive side of it. Now, they might have still had some, there probably are still some things that are lingering from what's the argument? An economic side of things. Like maybe Republicans back then and today still favor the idea of like lower taxes and things like that, maybe. But yeah, ideas definitely have changed. Like, for example, the Democrats back then were definitely about small government, states' rights, all the same arguments that you hear from Republicans today. It's the exact same thing. And the thing is, and I saw this when I did the reaction to the oversimplified Civil War video. Did I ever do a reaction to that? I know I've seen it. But when Abraham Lincoln ran for president the first time and he won, you'll notice that he ran against like 4 other people or 3 other people. And 2 of those people were both Democrats. One was a Northern Democrat, one was a Southern Democrat. And the Northern Democrat was not was not necessarily in favor with the idea of slavery, whereas the Southern one was deeply into it. If you look at the way votes usually went during the segregation eras, you'll see that Democrats and Republicans tended to vote similarly, not based on how the rest of their party members voted, but based on the people that were in their region voted. The South tended to vote one way, the North tended to vote another. Even if you were in the same party, a Northern Democrat tended to vote differently than a Southern Democrat. And the same thing with Republicans. So now there was more Southern Democrats that voted one way than Southern Republicans. But if you look at the percentage, a majority of people that were, let's say, against the idea of civil rights or was in favor of slavery or things like that, a majority of them, no matter which party you looked at, came from the South. And that has not changed since. To this day, when you look at the way that politicians tend to vote from the South or Southern regions, they tend to vote for the side that continues to spew the same shit they've been spewing since the 1800s. States' rights and smaller government and this, that, and the other. Like, it's the same stuff every single time. Their points haven't changed. Their sides haven't changed as far as their policies and ideas. The only thing that's changed is the party itself that they favor. The arguments are still the exact same.
Websites sure love you. Oh, yeah. Cancel culture just as much as they celebrate Civil War history. Those websites sure love you. Oh yeah, big fans. In the late 19th century, a major goal of the lost cause religion was to institutionalize itself. Early, Pendleton, Jones, and others were keenly aware that passing their ideas down to the next generation would be crucial to preserving the Confederate legacy. So they focused their advocacy on the education system. Now that the United Confederate Veterans and United Daughters of the Confederacy were established and active, Lost Cause evangelists had an organizational network to spread their ideas. Young women of the pre-war planter class, finding themselves in need of income after the abolition of slavery, gravitated toward teaching, and by the 1890s dominated primary school education. Reverend Jones and Susan Pendleton Lee, who was William Pendleton's daughter, both authored popular textbooks in the 1890s advancing the Lost Cause mythos, and Jones urged his fellow ex-Confederates to fight tooth and nail against the introduction of Northern-authored textbooks into Southern classrooms.
We should demand the abolition of Yankee school histories from our schools, and if they force the issue, we should squarely meet it and fight for a change in our school authorities if they persist in using Yankee school histories.
Ex-Confederates' mission to indoctrinate the rising generation was a resounding success. By the turn of the 20th century, the culture war was won, and the impact of that victory was soon felt all around the country. In 1896, post-war racial issues came to a head with the Supreme Court ruling Plessy versus Ferguson, which of course established separate but equal as a law of the land. White Southerners accepted legal segregation to be an effective substitute for slavery as a tool to control the black underclass. When the Spanish-American War and World War I gave the reunited states a new sense of national purpose, white Northerners grew more inclined toward reconciliation, and many came to accept the Lost Cause version of Civil War history. Essentially, to reunite white America, Northerners sacrificed the rights and dignity of black America. Blacks had fought and died for the Union and were instrumental in quelling the rebellion. But the Jim Crow era saw the Confederate vision of a white supremacist nation rise from the grave. Hell, the federal government...
And that kind of reflects the whole situation with like Russia and stuff today. Like, when you look at the idea of winning the war, but losing the culture war. Like, America won the Cold War, but Russia has been much more effective when it comes to influencing America in other ways. Not necessarily on the battlefield or anything like that, but in the minds and ideas of influential people that are in America that are essentially spewing and pushing their agendas. And I don't even know if it's stuff that Russia necessarily believes themselves, but they know that it's something that could lead to turmoil and dissension in America. So they push that type of stuff. Like, Russians were also the ones that during the civil rights era were pushing arguments that, like, oh, look at America. Look how they treat black people. Isn't this so wrong? And then now they're the same ones pushing the anti-woke DEI stuff nowadays. So it's like they're on both sides of the fence making the argument. And it's like they only really care about destabilizing America. And when I say Russia, I'm talking about the government. I'm not talking about the people. People of Russia are awesome. The government, not so much. Our government ain't that great either. Our government isn't great at all. Like, we have some shitty stuff in our government too, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like ours is better, but you know what I mean.
The white supremacist nation rise from the grave. Hell, the federal government even retired the hated blue uniform. In the trenches of the Western Front, Northern and Southern soldier alike wore khaki. But that wasn't the reason behind that decision. Most militaries switched to khaki uniforms around the turn of the 20th century. You should know this. Still a hell of a metaphor, though, ain't it? I'm still skeptical that everybody would just go along with this. Well, in the 20th century, the Lost Cause had a lot of help from the most effective propaganda tool in human history: the movies. D.W. Griffith's infamous 1915 blockbuster The Birth of a Nation and the classic 1939 historical epic Gone with the Wind both reflected and cemented white supremacist interpretations of Civil War history and American culture. By the time...
And funny enough, both those movies are considered to be critically the most successful movies of all time. Like, I think Birth of a Nation for a long time held the record for like the highest grossing movie of all time or something like that. And the movie was literally just Ku Klux Klan propaganda. That's it. Like, that's exactly what it was.
White supremacist interpretations of Civil War history in American culture. By the time Julius Howell was interviewed in the 1940s, the Lost Cause was firmly established in the popular imagination of a deeply segregated America. But then, in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, things changed. The Civil Rights Movement was a major blow to white supremacy in America. And as people of color gained more social and political agency, historians began to focus more on black perspectives in American history. The story that emerged from this research was a continuous struggle against authoritarianism and bigotry that resonated with Americans of the Vietnam era. In contrast, the Lost Cause came increasingly to be seen as a hateful and oppressive ideology, and mainstream historiography started to seriously question its legitimacy. The cat was out of the bag. In the 80s and 90s, historians like Gary Gallagher, James McPherson, Gaines Foster, and others thoroughly dismantled the tenets of the Lost Cause with some excellent scholarship. But there remained a serious disconnect between this growing academic consensus on one hand and the perception of the public at large on the other. The 1990 Ken Burns documentary The Civil War and the 1993 Ron Maxwell film Gettysburg spawned a huge surge of public interest in the Civil War, but they also propagated common misconceptions with origins in the Lost Cause myth. The Burns documentary's over-reliance on narration by Southern novelist Shelby Foote left many viewers with a mistaken impression of the causes of secession, and the overwrought sentimentality and sanitized violence of Maxwell's film glorified the war and the soldiers who fought in it. It also downplayed the importance of slavery to the Confederate cause. Gettysburg inspired thousands of people to become Civil War reenactors, and to this day, at public events, many reenactors will teach a version of Civil War history more inspired by the movie than by actual evidence. Are you about to shit on gods and generals again? Just one more time, please, and then I'll be done forever. You really can't help yourself, can you? The Lost Cause regained even more ground in 2003 with Gods and Generals, Maxwell's prequel to Gettysburg. This film wholeheartedly endorses the most counterfactual aspects of the Lost Cause myth and has done enormous damage to public understanding of the Civil War. Heavily based on late 19th century Lost Cause histories, the film has become a banner for white supremacists and neo-Confederates to rally under. A powerful...
I believe, like, for a while, people were saying, like, well, you know, maybe you're being too hard on the director or whatever, and, you know, they were just trying to paint a certain picture of the Civil War that they saw. But then I think like some like social media posts from that director started surfacing, and it's like, oh no, they're aware of what they were doing. Like, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were pushing some very eye-opening posts on social media.
The film has become a banner for white supremacists and neo-Confederates to rally under, a powerful 21st century expression of the Lost Cause religion. Great movie. The South was right. But then came the 2010s.
His name was
the
The
dawn
South
of a
was
new
right.
and wide-ranging social justice movement. Police brutality against black Americans in particular proved to be a major flashpoint for lingering racial issues. This new movement is complex and contentious, and since it's ongoing, it's difficult to make categorical statements. But one thing we seem to be in the midst of is an attempt to break down systemic inequality in the government and economy, which has led to a far more critical historiography of the eras of American history when those systems were established. The growing interest in black history seems to be inversely proportional to the Lost Cause's staying power. As more and more Americans renounce the Confederacy for the slavers' rebellion that it was, those still cleaving to the Lost Cause religion have become more culturally isolated, their ceremonies, rituals, and catechisms increasingly esoteric and irrelevant. Over the past decade, the Lost Cause has taken a severe beating, maybe even a fatal one, and a tiny part of that has been this show. Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you? But you are unfit to lick the boots of the Confederate heroes you defame. You dare insult General Lee? General Jackson? Well, let me tell you something, Billy. You will never compare to the man that Thomas Jackson was, for you will never be remembered or mentioned 160 years after your death with all your videos. Probably not. If this show is remembered, I would guess it would be as a small footnote of Civil War history's intersection with 21st century internet culture. If we're fortunate enough to have any legacy at all, I fully expect Checkmate Lincolnites to be considered an imperfect product of its time, like all written or filmed history. I hope we're remembered as a nail in the coffin of the lost cause, but who knows? Only time will tell. But there's one prediction that I am reasonably certain about. If things keep going the way they're going, the lost cause is doomed. The myth is like a frail, diseased, very racist old man.
To be fair, the myth of the lost cause was always doomed. Like, a lot of these types of arguments, like when you're trying to paint over the truth with like a narrative, eventually the truth will come through. Like, have y'all ever heard that term, lies run sprints, truth runs marathons? It's like, yeah, initially there'll be a big wave of people that believe this narrative that you've painted, but after a while, when that paint starts to dry, the cracks start to form. And when the cracks start to form, you start to see those pieces of truth start to spill out. And after a while, the truth underneath starts to chip away at the narrative until eventually the narrative is just completely wiped out. Like, it only lasts for so long. That's why I don't know why people try so hard to fight against what is inevitable. Like, you're fighting a losing battle. Well, I guess if you're Confederate, you're used to that. Am I right? But yeah, you're fighting a losing battle. So it's better to just give up on this cause. Be a better person. There are so many other causes and arguments to go up against. Like, right now, we have like elites and rich people essentially running our like lives and taking advantage of us, like just ransacking our government and our institutions for everything that helps the average American person. And people are too busy fighting amongst themselves over stupid culture war stuff. Like, there's so many other things going on right now, and there's literally a person walking into your house and stealing like your money and your resources right from under your nose, but then they point and go, that's the person you should be mad at. And people just like damn goldfish or something, just like, and then just go right for the thing that they're pointing at. It's like, okay, whatever, you're just letting this person take your that should be the damn next movement that gets pushed through here. Like, making America more focused on the average person again, instead of focusing so much on trying to cater to the ultra rich.
The myth is like a frail, diseased, very racist old man drawing rattling breaths from a life support system. Can't we just go ahead and pull the plug?
I pull that damn plug just to charge my phone.
1984. Oh my God. 1984. The cultural Marxists and the radical left are seeking to erase the truth of Civil War history. I will always stand for the truth, no matter how unpopular it may be. You're projecting. The evangelists of the lost cause rewrote history in the late 19th century. Now their work is finally being undone. We're finally course correcting away from all their madness and their baggage, and you can't fucking handle it.
You're not even pretending to be objective anymore. You reveal yourself for what you've always been. A biased, moralizing, Yankee soy boy!
Damn it, Johnny. You never give me the benefit of the doubt. Most people think you're a fucking racist scum of the earth because you fly this fucking flag. You think I'm the bad guy? No. I'm coddling you like the big fucking baby you are, trying to gently coax you into the 21st century before the people behind me fucking drag you there. People think you are a fucking joke, Johnny. You've been discredited time and again. Your monuments are coming down. Your staunchest advocates are doddering old fools, and pretty soon, they're gonna be in the fucking ground. What have we been doing all this time?
That will be a glorious day.
Have I been talking to a brick wall? Jesus!
I look forward to seeing what America looks like 300 years from now, when we've managed to hopefully get past the racism and the bigotry and the xenophobia and the misogyny and just everything that's been dragging us down for like centuries. We are Nazis, and we. Oh shit.
Sword of Baron Samedi.
Loa of the dead, and the keeper of cemeteries.
My lord, with all due respect, I'm uncomfortable with this voodoo ritual. It doesn't feel very Christian to me.
Fear not, my patriotic friend. You have but a small part to play in it.
What do I need to do?
Die. Oh, brothers of the master race. Oh, warriors of the Southland. The time
Convenient they were all
for
buried
your
in the same place.
vengeance has come. Rise up and claim your destiny. Rise up! Rise up! Rise up!
And a cowboy hat? Didn't know Robert E. Lee liked to wear cowboy hats. His arm.
Rise up! Rise up!
Has its own lighting. A lot of Confederate soldiers were big into the prospector and cowboy hats. I'm just imagining what the people walking past the area he's recording and seeing him over there like acting out like what their opinions are. You just walk past, you see this person in the middle of a, well, it looks like a graveyard going, "Rise up!" Like, okay, let's walk faster. I think that's pretty much it. Yep. Giving a shout out to all the patrons. If you want to check out his Patreon channel, you can check out the link that will take you to Atun-Shei's channel right over here. And I'm pretty sure he has his Patreon linked inside of his channel. Or you can go to the original video. I'm pretty sure his Patreon is in the description box. Let me see. No, I just see PayPal. well, check out his, no, wait, I'll tell you, never mind. There's a button on the bottom that says support on Patreon. So if you wanted to support his Patreon, which I think that it would be very important that you do, because historical channels usually have a very hard time getting monetized by YouTube, because YouTube does not care too much about discretion or the context of an argument. All they care about, like all they hear is just one specific subject. So if he's talking about the Confederacy, as far as YouTube is concerned, it doesn't matter if you're speaking in support of the Confederacy or arguing against it. It's all the same to them. Same with like the fact that this has a Nazi in it. It doesn't matter if you're speaking for or against. YouTube just puts it all in the same basket, and that leads to demonetization. So if you want to help him out and help support him, then check out his Patreon. It'll be linked in the original video, which is linked on this video in the description box. Now, with that being said, I'll be sure to check out some more of Atun-Shei's videos in the future. For now, I am Devon DaVinci. I hope you guys enjoyed my reaction. And until then, I'm going to give you the deuces, and I'm signing out. Peace.